Welcome back to the Lords of Lore podcast. I'm Matt,
I'm Luca.
And I'm Will.
and this is the podcast for all things fantasy and sci-fi nerddom. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the music of fantasy and sci-fi. Okay, so before we get into our main topic today, we're going to go through our regular scheduled segments, including first Luca's Litany of Literature, wherein Luca has the podcast within the podcast, talks a little bit about what's going on in his life. Then I will bring a monster to the conversation. We'll talk about, its edification and use in tabletop role-playing games. And then finally, we'll get into the main topic with Will's Wondrous Wisdom, wherein Will brings us some wondrous wisdom on the main topic. And then we'll start diving into all the juicy, sweaty nerdery. So, Luca, what's going on, man?
Today we're talking about not having time to read. The only thing that I've been reading recently is the upcoming Rumination, or it just started, The Bone Shard Daughter. So look forward to that.
Can I get your initial thoughts?
Super interesting. Like, I'm still super confused about the magic system, but I like the perspective of the multiple different characters.
Mm-hmm.
I am enjoying it so far.
Nice.
But we will talk about not having time to read, and let me show you something that I bought almost a year ago now.
Oh no.
I bought.
Oh yeah, put your hand behind. Yeah, there we go. Brandon Sanderson. This is Mistborn. Oh,
this is the Rhythm of War.
Okay.
What does it sound like?
This is how thick it is.
Oh. Ooh.
It is a chonker.
Thick one.
So yeah, I still haven't read the third book. This is the fourth book.
But you bought the fourth?
I did. I bought it as soon as it came out.
I have so many questions, but please continue.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just like a taste of, or just a visual representation of how thick these stories can be. I mean, like, this is a very long book. Like this is a monster. It's like 1,300 pages. Yeah.
Holy.
Thick.
That is chonky.
It is, yeah. It is excellent, but it takes a long time to get through. Honestly, he writes them faster than I read them. Like, I'm not even joking.
That's incredible. Okay, I have some questions.
Okay.
Unless you have some more to add to your experience with not having time to read.
Not really. I just haven't had time this week. That has been my week.
Okay, so this is funny that Will's actually been reading this week, and the two of us, for the most part, haven't.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading this graphic novel. I was telling you guys a bit off camera, I should say. But I have some questions about book piles, whether they be digital or physical book piles. Now, Luca, you and I are both miniature painters. I think I paint a little more frequently than you do.
Mm-hmm.
But back when we were before the pandemic, when we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, often you were painting at least one model a week, if not much more than that.
Yes.
So this 2020, at the beginning of 2020, I got a 3D printer.
Mm-hmm.
And so you and I used to purchase board games with tons of minis in them.
Yep.
And we would split the minis and we would like roll dice to decide who got to pick first. And then we'd pick one by one, all the minis. And so I have, accumulated a pile of boxes with hundreds of minis in them at this point, maybe even thousands, that sits on the shelf that I rarely go through. And sometimes I will and be like, wow, this is a really cool mini. I should paint this, but I don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sits in that box and just basically takes up room in my life. But when I got a 3D printer, all that physical storage turned into hard drive storage, in that I subscribe to these Patreons that provide anywhere from 10 to 20 models a month in various sizes. And sometimes there's 50 models in a monthly release. And now all that storage, I don't have to look at it. It's just somewhere on a disc,
Mm-hmm.
and I make sure everything's organized so that when I do want to print and paint those things, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But I know, like, throughout the course of my life, there are some minis that I own that I paid for and downloaded. I'm just never going to print.
Yep.
And even if I print them, I might not paint them. I feel the same way about books. I'm looking over and I have like 3 or 4 art books I've just never opened.
Mm-hmm.
I just bought them because I really loved the movie and I wanted to have something from the movie. So I bought the art book. And a few of them I've read and they're awesome. But I don't know, I just wanted them. So I bought them. And then there's other actual books I bought because the covers were cool, or even I think I mentioned in our last rumination, I started buying the books that we're reviewing just so that I can give them to people if they're like, hey, that sounded interesting.
Yeah.
Or force people I love to read them so I have more people to talk about it. Or like, hey, watch our podcast. But I don't need those. Like I held it up on screen and for the most part, I haven't really touched them since, but I wanted them.
Mm-hmm.
How much of your purchasing books is solely out of, hey, that's pretty cool, I want that? And how much of it is like, I actually intend to read this at the earliest convenience?
I feel like more of them I wanted to read. Like I'll hear about a book that I want to read, and then I'll like be in chapters and be like, ooh, like there it is. Like that's a cool cover. Like I'll buy that and read it. So like I watched the movie Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy years and years ago. And then I was like looking for a book. I don't even remember what book. It was a fantasy book. And I just walked through the sci-fi section. I saw it and I was like, oh, wow. It was like all the series in one giant book.
Oh, yeah. Hardcover.
So I bought it.
Yeah.
And then I've never opened it. Like I've never even read the first page.
Oh, no way.
So like I've wanted to read it, but it's just, I have like this list of books. Actually, I have another book here. I don't know if I can.
The ninth.
Zoom. It's The Ninth House.
Okay. Who's this by?
This is by it's by Leigh Bardugo. I actually bought this book exclusively because of the snake on the cover. So just like a black snake that like weaves through the letters.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so cool. And it's a New York Times bestseller. And I was like, wow, this looks interesting. I didn't even read the synopsis. I just bought it because of the cover. And then later I like heard a review about it that was like excellent, like one of the best books of the year, all this stuff. And I was like, oh, I should read that. Like I have it. But I haven't. I still haven't opened it.
Okay, so I also have a pile of books off screen here. One I am actively reading. But it's a graphic novel. So but it relates to another one that's just off screen here. I was talking to you guys about Monstress, Volume 1. I bought that, I think at this point, 3 months ago, if I'm remembering correct. I think I mentioned it on the podcast. I went on this date where we went to a bookstore and bought books. I don't know. And it was one of the ones I bought because I was like, oh, cool cover. And there was like the full, like thick ass, like this is everything that's ever been released for this series. And then like Volume 1. And I was like, which one should I get? And then I was like, oh, save money and get this. What if I don't like it? And so it sat on my shelf for 3 months until like maybe a week ago. I had like a night where I wasn't doing anything. We had everything recorded. I had edited everything. And I was like, sure, I'll crack this book open. Because I tried to like 3 or 4 times, like had it on my bedside table and then just like fell asleep or like, had other shit to do. And then I finally started reading it and was like, this is incredible. I love this. This has been sitting on my shelf for 3 months. This is the best. And so I immediately ordered the next 2 volumes, which I'll try to show here. Really cool art. By 2 women, Marjorie Liu and Sana Takada, Takeda, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it's fucking incredible. At least I think they're 2 women. I don't know. I shouldn't assume. But yeah, it's a really cool story if you haven't checked that out. But then I also have, this is Arthur Spiderwick's Field Guide to Fantastic World Around You. If anyone's read the Spiderwick Chronicles, it's the book that exists within that world. This was a Christmas gift. that I flipped through but never read. Tony DeTurlizzi is the artist. And this is God of War, which I talk about ad nauseum. And I haven't read this. This is like a lore book of all the journal entries that Atreus fills out. And this one I've had for like 6 months. And it's just been sitting there. And I'm just like, man, I should really dive into that. And then I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what my problem is. And especially since we started, like you put me onto Audible, I think. You were like, hey, you should try listening to books opposed to reading them. Oh, and I forgot, I have The Green Knight. Again, I solely bought this because it had the poster on the cover, and I really wanted something from The Green Knight. And so I had to buy it because I'm a filthy, filthy consumer. Yeah. But yeah, ever since we started doing like Audible books, I'm like, I buy less physical books, but you get the credit every month. And so I'm just like, hey, that's a cool cover.
Mm-hmm.
And I add books to my wish list or to my library that, like, I don't know if I'm ever going to read them. And like, I only really make time for the Ruminations books because, you know, that's something we like agreed to do. Yeah. What about you, Will? Do you have a pile of books that you haven't read?
Yes. No, I would say I probably have a very extensive one. It got to the point where, like, if I went to a bookstore, I'd probably purchase anywhere between 5 to 10.
Oh my God.
Jeez.
I usually go to like those like used bookstores and stuff like that, like the older ones.
Mhm.
So like it's usually, I don't know, I'll be honest with you, I find that like Chapters or Indigo or whatever, Coles is usually kind of lacking with fantasy and stuff like that.
I'm a sucker for the big brand stores.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I like the appeal of like the small, you know.
Yeah. Also
owned,
just
like,
because,
you know, local.
Yeah, well, also because like the last two places that I lived, I guess for the better part of a decade, were like relatively close to a smaller bookstore, so that's also a thing. Yeah, I would probably say I probably have like, I don't know, like 200 books or some shit
That you haven't read.
I would say probably right now about 20 to 25 that I haven't read yet. But yeah, I don't know, because like usually like what I'm really bad for, and I think I might have mentioned this before, is like I'll read like 4 books at a time, just like at different like points and stuff. But like lately I found that I've just been like drawn into one, which is The Inheritance Cycle, like my boy Christopher Paolini, because I used to love it when I was a kid. So like that's pretty much all that I've been reading lately. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You seem to reread books often. Like you say, you'll pick up The Hobbit every once in a while and just start reading at a random point.
Yeah.
And then you end up finishing the book and you're like, oh shit.
I know. I've read The Fall of Reach, like one of the Halo books, like probably about like 12 times.
Jeez.
It's like,
okay, so how much of your reading would you say is rereading? Like what percent? What's the ratio?
fuck. Probably
Is it like less or more than half?
probably just slightly less than half.
Okay.
Lately I've been like reading a lot of like, maybe not like non fantasy, more so just like it's like manuals on like how to like do stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, but like also like I like to read like history as well. So like those are kind of, if I'm not like reading a fantasy book, that's probably what I'm reading, is one of those two. But
I have such a hard time in actually like putting aside time to read things because I can't do the multiple things at once.
yeah.
And if I do, they have to be in different mediums. Like I could read a book like this graphic novel series I'm reading and then listen to a book on Audible, or I could read a physical book and listen to a book on Audible, or watch a TV show and then watch a movie, like all in the same day. But I can't pick up 2 separate books and start, you know what I mean?
It's not a very good habit.
No, I do the thing where like if I'm like in one thing, I'll like stop at like, let's say like halfway through the book, and then I won't pick up any other book because I'm like, no, I'm reading this book, but I'm not into it, or whatever the case is, or I don't have time, or I don't make time. And then so there's all these other books that start to pile up. And I'm like, well, I can't get to those until I've finished The Green Knight that I haven't read a page of. And it just starts this awful thing where, like, maybe a year later, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to read that book. It's time to move on. And then I'll just like binge. And then it happens again.
Yeah. I know, like right now I probably had like, yeah, like I said, like I don't know, 15 to like maybe 20 books that I've bought like just since like the spring that have just been like sitting there, just like a whole wide range. But then I just went and bought like the entire like inheritance like cycle like in a box set. Because actually like I have all the hardcover ones from when I was a kid, but they're like completely torn apart from like
You should
rereading
read a
so much.
manual on how to restore books.
Mayhaps, yeah. Because like yeah, well, like I just like didn't want to like fuck with them. So
Yeah.
like yeah, I reordered this, but like the inheritance cycle, like I think the second, third, and fourth books alone are like minimum like 1,000 to like 1,500 pages, something like that. Like they just like increase in size. So like yeah, I just have like a stack that's just gonna be like collecting dust for the next like 5 months.
Yeah. There was a phase like 2016 to like 2018-ish, like right before Force Awakens came out to right after Last Jedi came out, where I read every Star Wars book that came out like religiously. I have a whole shelf in a different room of like everything in chronological order, including comic books, including like all different trilogy timelines. And then as soon as Last Jedi hit, I was like, what the fuck is the point? They don't even care. Like it's not real canon. It's like book reader canon. So I was like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
But there's some good stories in there. But that was weird because like I like set timelines for myself in that because it's like, okay, I want to read these before the movie comes out so I can understand the Easter eggs. And then, you know, when there's no Easter eggs, you're like, fucking, what was the point of that? Like, there's one that I think we talked about before that predates Rogue One, or is like the prequel, I guess, or like leads into Rogue One. That one's pretty awesome and was important to the story, but
Yeah.
besides that, they're all sort of just.
I should also note as so like I don't seem as scatterbrained as I probably just sounded, but I also like buy a lot of books that I think that like because like I have like this weird like thing in my head, especially due to like the past year and a half, where if like the world were to end, I would have like a massive library. So if I were to like have to like re-educate like the human race as it's budding coming out of the bunkers and stuff like that, like
It's just the Hobbit and fucking Aragon.
I would be able to shape the world.
So like yeah, no, that totally made you sound less scatterbrained.
Yeah, just
no,
more psychotic.
Good thing you brought that up.
But like yeah, but like classics and stuff like that. Like I'll like if I see like or if I see like a hardcover of like a classics, I'll be like that I really like.
Okay.
I'll buy it. So for example, like the last time I was like cruising books, like a bookstore, I bought like this like hardcover of like Dracula, like the Bram Stoker and stuff like that. So like those kinds of, or like H.G. Wells or like classics and shit, but like only like the cool ones.
Yeah.
Fuck your Pride and Prejudice.
I don't want to grab them because they're hefty, but I have the Rise of Skywalker art book off to the side, and I have this beautiful Critical Role deluxe edition collector's vault art book that I've literally never opened. It takes up so much fucking room. I got a Blade Runner 2049 one that's like 16 inches long. It doesn't fit on any shelf well, and I've literally never opened it. I'm like, these are great coffee table books, and I don't own a coffee table, and I don't have people over. So I don't know why I buy these things. Sorry, I hijacked your segment here, Luca, with my fucking yeah. I want to ask one last question before we wrap this up, though. How much, I know there's obviously like that fucking famous quote of like, don't judge a book by its cover. How much does a cover go into you guys actually buying a book? Like, well, you said you buy it if it's like a nice hardcover of a classic. Luca, you bought that because it had a snake on it. Like, how big of a part does the face art play for you guys?
Depends how much I know about the story. If I know zero about the story, then like a lot. a lot. But if I know anything about the story and I'm even slightly interested, it doesn't really matter. I'm disappointed if I don't like the cover, but I'll still buy it. But if I know nothing about the story, like Ninth House, like I just thought it was like such like a simple but elegant snake. And I was like, wow, that's so cool and so shiny. So I was like, I'm buying that hardcover.
Nice.
So yeah, it depends on what I know.
So I do have a funny story about judging a book by its cover. But I would say like it depends on the book. Like if it's like definitely like I said, like I saw like Dracula, which is also like one of my favorite stories of all time. Like I wanted to get like a nice copy, like a hardcover one. So like usually I only do that if I see something like I actually like, but I would be wary of like mass produced ones. So like there's not like a complete thrashing of Canterbury classics, but like you might have seen like when you go into like bookstores or like especially like I know these sell like tons of them at like Costco and stuff, where it's like these hardcover like really nice books of like classics and stuff like that. And I find that like sometimes like the spine isn't as good. So like if I see like something like basically like if I buy a book, I just wanted to make sure that it like stays together. Because I know I'm gonna like put it through the ringer. So
I have some I have some Howard Pyle, King Arthur, and Robin Hood just off screen here.
Yeah.
And I kept them in my garage. When I moved houses like 10 to 15 years ago at this point, they were in the garage and stayed in there for like maybe 10 or 12 years. And they're still in good shape, good enough that I put them on the shelf in my room that I like keeping closer to me than the other shelves outside.
Also, yeah, quick story time. So when I was a kid, like I was like up visiting my grandmother for the summer, and then we like, which is also in the town in my what would go on to be my hometown eventually, but we were like we went to like this one store, which is kind of like a mini department store, and then so like I was in there like doing my thing. I was probably about like 8 or 9 years old at the time. I saw like a stack of like, you know, it's like New York bestseller kind of thing. So then I saw one with like a werewolf, and I was like, sweet, because like I don't know, I thought it was gonna be about like werewolves and stuff, right? Did not. It was no. It was like this like it was like a romance novel for like geared towards like middle-aged women. So like that week,
that actually happened to me a lot in like when I was younger and like first got into reading fantasy. I would just see like the name of a book at like a used bookstore or something and just grab it. And then they're like Danielle Steele novels that I just like I found them in the garage not long ago. I was like, why do I have these? Like,
yeah,
what the fuck?
that was the summer I learned what like pectorals and the abs were. And yeah.
That's incredible.
Like I had like no idea. Like we had not hit sex ed in school yet at this point. So like,
oh my god, sex ed via romance novels.
But
like it's the 1980s.
It was yeah. It was
okay. Sorry,
I still have it too, which is a funny thing.
You still have that book?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should do that as a rumination. Okay, sorry, I have more questions now because I fucking love this. How do you guys display your books?
In piles, like a wizard.
Like a wizard.
I keep them together. Like if it's a series, boom, 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 and then by size.
Okay, so like your shelf is very much like a constant,
yeah,
like sloping. Okay, but covers are important to you,
yes,
as they are for me. How like would you ever like display it intentionally so that the cover is showing, or if it has a nice spine, do you do that as well?
I would. I mean, I don't have my books are in my room, and I don't really host many people in my room. But in the future, I would like to have like a big bookshelf where I'd like turn the covers I like, be like, oh, look what I've read. Like,
yeah. I think it's interesting too because it's like owning physical books outside of having them to read is kind of funny like having books on displays, like you say, it's like, oh, see what I've read. I'm very learned. Here's a manual on how to repair books. But it's weird. But like when I look at the books, like the just to the left of me here, it's like I call them like micro joys. It's the reason why I keep miniatures and like little bobbleheads and stuff around too, because it's like these are things I see and they remind me of like properties I love or stories I love or people I love. And for books, it's like the same thing. But I just like looking at it's almost like looking at a wall of accomplishments. Like, yeah, I did read that, or yeah, there is a lesson to be learned out of that story. But also the spines look fucking cool. So like, and the covers are cool. So like sometimes I'll just like aesthetically like change, or I love like going on Pinterest and just like bookshelf and seeing what other people have done with their bookshelves.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to mine, I'm actually too like I don't know, like pragmatic, like efficient. Like I'm like, if these books are different sizes, they can't be next to each other. It has to slope up gradually, or else I hate it. And if this book is as tall as the one next to it, but it's not as thick, and so it's like indented into like I hate that. Like the Sword of Kaigen is tall, but it's thinner than Fires of Vengeance, and every time I see it, I cringe a little bit. I don't know where to put it because it's thicker than everything else, but like, I don't know. It's tough. I don't have this problem with audio books.
Yeah.
They're all just nice, 1x1 JPEG.
Yeah. I don't know. You could literally just use a stack of books in my room as a mattress. Because like I'm literally that's what I'm using for a stand for my laptop right now. It's just
you're using books?
Yeah.
Which ones?
I have a Guinness World Records from 2003. Have you ever heard of the novel called Inkheart?
Yeah, I have. And that's a really sweet cover. I actually own that.
Yeah,
it's like red with like yeah,
it's holding it up right now.
Sick. Yeah, that's like, oh man, remember the Scholastic Book Fair?
Yeah. You'll bastard with his knife.
Straight up.
Yeah. Also, one of my anthropology textbooks, Archaeology of the Americas, 9th edition. So it's just all over the place.
Okay, quick story, then we can move on. One time I called my buddy and he picks up and he's like, what? I was like, whoa, like, what, are you busy or something? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm reading. And he like, we're on FaceTime. So he like pulls this thing out. He's reading like, I can't remember the guy's name, but so-and-so's Bathroom Reader Volume 9. Like, just fun facts for the toilet. I'm like, and he's like sitting on his like living room couch, just like taking it all in. I was like, yo, what the fuck? I'm reading. What? Fucking, you might as well be on TikTok, man.
Yeah.
Anyways,
like the Facebook news page from like your local
of the
community.
1990s.
Yeah.
And he was on volume 9. He's like, yeah, I found these all in my garage. Like all 9 of them.
I'm a journalist. He's looking at the coffee news. Like,
yeah, he said like when he was younger he had a very short attention span, so these were the only books he could actually read. Readers. Oh, shout out Sharif.
Oh no. That makes it worse. But it adds up for sure. You reading this shit, man?
Yo, did you know that? No, how could I have possibly known that, man? Yeah, okay. You can have your segment back now, Luca.
It's done.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, let's move into Matt's Monster Music. So, because we're talking about music today in our main topic, which I promise we will get to eventually, I thought we should talk about there was a bunch of monsters I could have chosen that use music as a means of luring people in, but I said, nah, that's too obvious. So I chose a Banshee. Okay, so when I say Banshee, Luca, what are your first thoughts?
Just like a screaming spirit, just constant screaming.
And what's the visual you get?
I guess like a wraith, sort of.
Oh.
Okay, and Will?
I would say like ghost with ghost with like a sheath, kind of like, just like tattered robes, usually like a more feminine form. I guess usually, like, I would say almost all the banshees I've ever seen in media are usually like deceased women or something like that. Yeah, definitely high-pitched screaming, hence the name. Like scream like a banshee. So that's kind
Yeah.
of how they like fuck up their victims and shit.
Okay. You guys are both right on point. Especially when we're talking about like modern or pop culture representation of banshees. Now, one last question: where do you think the myth or the legend of banshees came from?
Honestly, I have no idea how to even begin
Irish.
to like
Correct.
choose a really wow.
Yeah. Which I was surprised by, and then they showed the historic spelling of banshee. It's like BEAN space SHI. Just made me laugh.
Banshee.
Yeah. Banshee. This is funny. Anyways, that translation, Banshee, well, pronounced Banshee, obviously, because Irish people, translates, some people believe, to fairy woman, but fairy actually used to mean other world. So that word sort of took on a new connotation throughout time. But so like fae, fairy, other world type of thing. So it could either be fairy woman or woman of the other world. So we got Dom Toretto in the cut. For the audio listeners, Will's looking dazed. But yeah, female spirit from Irish mythology. She's said to predict your death before it happens, obviously before it happens, because she's predicting it, and helps you prepare for it. So there were stories of like there's only specific families she will do this for, and it's the Irish nobility. So last names that start with O, Mick, or Mac. Those families might be visited by a banshee. So all Irish people.
Boom, roasted.
Boom. Take that, Ireland. So those families might hear a banshee call. And it's super funny. The video I was watching about banshees as I prepared for this, were like, yeah, a banshee will like scream in the night and like moan and then clap. So it's like very like, I think like they just threw those sounds together in the video. And I was like, that out of context, that is not terrifying. Like that's a very different interpretation. But yeah, it would come to these families and wail. And then next thing you know, the heir of the family would pass away shortly thereafter. So how this legend came to be, there are these people. So there's the legend sort of starts way back in Ireland, where it said like the first woman to ever cry was mourning the loss of her son. I don't know the details of that specific legend, but from that legend formed this type of service, essentially. And this service exists in many different parts of the world, but basically people who mourn for you at a funeral or something, like you can hire professional mourners to come. And it's basically just like to have them serve as like a catharsis, share in the pain, even though they might not know this person. That's their duty. That's their job, is to mourn with you type of thing. I know in like some African cultures, there's women who do this as well. And in Ireland, they're called keeners, or the keening women. And they're part of the death ritual that passes a spirit into the next plane of existence. But they were often ostracized because of their connection to like the other world. Not ostracized, but like outcasted, sometimes by choice. Sometimes people are just like, oh, spooky, like get too close to the keeners, you might like, transition into the other world, otherwise die. So they're often just like sort of like nomadic people, and would just be like, barefoot traveling through Ireland, going from funeral to funeral. And they were paid, like I said. So it was only these families, the O's, the Micks, the Macs, that could actually, the Mickos or whatever, that could afford them to be there. And so it's believed that it's actually the inverse, that the legend says that they only come to these families because these families were the only ones that could afford them. that's how the Banshee legend sort of started, and that because they were traveling the way they were, barefoot, traveling lightly, their clothes were often, worse for wear, and they often looked disheveled, relative to the people they were tending to. And so that's where the image or the visual of the Banshee comes from. It's from like these keening women, these mourners. So yeah, pretty creepy. Also, one of the war goddesses in Ireland, her name is Kata Bodva, or Bod, which is also an alternate name for the Banshee. It's spelled Bodh. I'm probably pronouncing that. And she can also shapeshift into a crow, which is just a neat fact I thought was interesting. The legend of the Banshee starts to disappear with the British invasion. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Now I want to talk a little bit about how Banshees appear in Dungeons and Dragons. For anyone who doesn't know, because we have some new listeners here, Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game. You roll dice and pretend to be things. Yeah, it's fantasy based. So they are challenge rating 4, which means a party of level 4s or a smaller party with higher levels, 5 or 6, might be able to encounter one of these things and come out on top. They can detect life around them. They have an ability called Corrupting Touch. They touch you and you get necrotic damage. Horrifying Visage. Each non-dead creature around it that can see the Banshee has to succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be turned. So they're just too afraid by looking at it that they will be, fearful and run away. And then they can obviously do their wail, which is their high-pitched scream, which can cause psychic damage, but also can render you immobile and stuck, sort of just reacting to the scream. These are super fun to use, obviously, because you can play into a lot of tropes of like the damsel in distress. It's like there's a woman out in the woods that people, have been seeing. So you could be like, oh, it's a ghost, but it's really just one of these banshees. Maybe there's like a royal family or someone in the village where your players are who doesn't know they're of royal blood, and this banshee's coming to warn them of their impending doom. And then, yeah, maybe that person dies or something. So yeah, banshees are fun to use. Luca, you're a DM. How would you use a banshee?
I don't know, aside from what using all the features you just told me about, which I didn't know about. Honestly, I'd probably do something super lame, like use it as just like a wraith from what I knew about it, but I'd have to like read its character sheet and all that and try to influence, like add it into the story somehow. But I don't know anything about the Banshee. All of this was new information to me.
Nice. That's what we're here for. What about you, Will?
How I would use it? Yeah.
Yeah, or just thoughts on the Banshee.
I would probably say like a vengeful spirit kind of thing. It's like, I don't know, just terror inducing. Like you're walking through a swamp at night or something like that. You just see this creature floating around, screeching. Yeah, actually, yeah, because well, like this entire summer I've just been playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and like the first DLC is like the entirety of like the island of Ireland, or most of it, I should say. So like there's definitely like some mentions of it and stuff. Not as much because
Cool.
they're like this take in this game is like a little bit more historical and less mythical compared to like other Assassin's Creed games of late. But yeah, no, like there's like side missions and stuff like that of like events going on, like when you're just like traveling through the countryside, like that, like one that deals with a banshee, but it actually just turns out to be like this guy who like accidentally killed his wife, and like he was like grieving for it, but like in his grieving process, due to like being an accident, he thought he was like being haunted and stuff. So you have to like solve like this little mystery and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So like it's kind of cool, like unnerving, I guess.
Yeah.
But I do kind of prefer like the more like vengeful spirits type. Like,
yeah. So
like
it is worth
boss
noting.
encounter.
some banshees, the legends surrounding them are that it was a woman who was wronged in life, and for that reason cannot pass into the next world. So serves as like a intermediate between the two. There's also the reason sometimes they're connected to those royal families, Omic and Mac, is that
And Patty Whack.
yeah, and Patty Whack, and O'Houlihan, is because they're connected to like the land that they live on, or more specifically, the house they live in. So as long as that house is still standing, the Banshee will still protect that family. So that's why in some instances they're like you find them in like old ruins, is because if there's even like a brick still standing, it'll be bound to that place. In D&D, that's represented by Sorrowbound, one of their abilities, not on their character sheet, but in the description. It's forever bound to the place of its demise. So a little bit different, but the place where it died is the place it haunts, essentially. And they're also beauty hoarders in the D&D canon. The vanity that inspired the Banshee's cursed creation persists in its undeath. These creatures covet beautiful objects, fine jewelry, paintings, statues, and other objects of art. So that could be a cool thing you throw in there as well.
Yeah. Like you could
so-
do like a
Sorry,
like
go
an
ahead.
exorcist style, like I guess campaign or like mission session kind of thing, like where you have to like, I guess I don't know. That's how I would do it. Is like a detective kind of thing goes in
Ooh.
to like solve a mystery, and it turns out to be like a banshee that's haunting people.
Yeah, like a kid goes missing because they were playing in the old ruins where their mom told them not to, and they found like an old ring.
Yeah, I'm
And the
thinking
Banshee came for them.
the movie the Woman in Black with Daniel Radcliffe, horror movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty spooky.
I've never seen it, but yeah, I remember the trailer was spooky.
Yeah, like something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like an old house you're staying at, it's haunted by a banshee.
Yeah.
I don't know what to compare this one to give you guys a choice. So let's think here. Would you rather be stuck in a house that's haunted by a banshee,
No.
or be in the perimeter? I can't remember what it's called. The thing that a dryad has control over, that circular area of a forest where she can, step through trees and appear in other trees in that same area. So would you rather be in a house haunted by a banshee, or be in that circle of a dryad that you pissed off?
What does the banshee look like?
Yeah, like a ghost with wispy hair. I guess like a wisp mother from Skyrim is a pretty good example. Like a ring wraith without armor and flowing hair. Like if Galadriel was a ring wraith, just get
Like
super meta with it.
When
Imagine Frodo was
offers-
a woman.
Go on. Remember, I would take the banshee. She's stuck in the house with me.
You're a Rorschach style. Oh, you're in here with me.
Just terrorize
Luca?
the ghost.
Yeah. She
think
burns
I'd
the
say-
house down to get away from you.
Yeah.
I think I'd take the Banshee as well. I think it's easier to get out of the house than out of the forest.
Fair enough.
Oh, true.
Yeah. I think you guys are right. It sort of looks, Will, like when Frodo puts the ring on at the top of Amon Sur and sees what the ring wraiths look like. Sort of looks like that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let's dive into our main topic here, but we'll start with Will's Wondrous Wisdom. Today we're talking about the music of fantasy and sci-fi. So what have you brought for us today?
Yeah, this one was kind of difficult, but I mean,
I bet.
Real world origin of music.
Real world music.
when Will's ancient caveman ancestors started banging rocks together, they in 2 million BC.
Yeah,
After-
it's your great to the nth grandfather who was the fish who came out.
This fish just picked up 2 rocks and started banging them together. That's how D&D music was created.
Jeez.
I mean, I'll be honest, I did search up specifically I guess like history of D&D music. I just like couldn't find anything, but I did find like tons of like a lot of just like different boards, like especially like there's even like subreddits for D&D music specifically with like
Okay.
fairly large followings as well, where people just share just different tracks and stuff like that that they would use to like supplement their sessions. So like that would either be like I guess just like ones that they had found or like user created themselves. Yeah, I don't know, like I think as far as I could tell, like music and D&D have like really always been a thing. Maybe not like in the early 70s/80s when motherfuckers didn't have iPods shit, but let's boot up the 8-track system, let's listen to some like creepy classical music, something like that. I don't know, but yeah, music
Yeah.
is important, is a thing.
That's some wondrous wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
if you like, if I mean, like, I searched up D&D music, and it's just like you get like millions of hits.
Yeah, even if just like a simple fantasy music, or like this is like, and I think we often pick topics that are very hard to search to do.
Incredibly vague.
Incredibly vague.
Sound?
Yeah. So hard to research. I can't remember the other ones, but I remember it like often when we start a main topic, we go, yeah, this one was hard to research. Just because like there's so much online now that is sort of not curated to your actual search words, but are going off of buzzwords and algorithms. So like, I type in the origins of fantasy music, and it's like fantasy music for all your tabletop needs. And it's like, I don't have any of those needs. I want to know the origins.
Which is why you put it in quotation marks when you search.
Yeah, I know. And then you put origin fantasy music, and it's like Wolverine Origins soundtrack. Like, fucking okay, I'll just try some other search words. What I was able to find is that music actually activates every area of the brain so far as we've mapped the brain as a race of scientists, which I am not, but I have a podcast. But yeah, I actually watched a video where they put this guy like in the MRI machine and listened to different types of music. They put a guy in the MRI machine and made him play music.
Blasted Sovngarde for the Skyrim soundtrack.
Yeah. But they do use like some historical composers, some of like the greats, but also like this artist, I can't remember what his name was, but he's sort of like a jazz contemporary artist, and it was interesting to see him like playing music that he wrote was accessing parts of the brain that were more to do with self-analyzation and memory, obviously, and then obviously the coordination that goes into playing the music. But then they asked him to like freestyle and make something up on the spot, and that those parts of the brain completely shut off. Not completely, but definitely shut off the self-analyzing and the being aware of social influences. Sort of took the backseat to creation and technical skills. I'm doing a shitty job of explaining this, but it was pretty interesting to see the effect music can have on different parts of the brain, which I think leads into our main topic, in that the music in the movies and video games and TV shows that we love, fantasy and sci-fi, can really influence the way we perceive something. I always love to watch scenes in movies that are like these epic scenes, and you can find them on YouTube with like no music. One of the most infamous ones is like the medal ceremony in Star Wars. You can find it. I'm not even sure if it's real. There's a real one, and then there's like a few of like people like add things to it to make it funny. So because when they shot it, obviously they didn't have music, so it's just Leia walking up, it's quiet. Somebody coughs in the background. She puts the medals on them. They smile all awkwardly. But obviously, when you get that John Williams fanfare at the end, it's like this incredible moment. And like the happiness is coming more through the music than the actual actions of the characters. So yeah, I want to talk about that today and how music influences our perception on fantasy and how sometimes it can become part of the story. So I have a list of my favorite composers here, and we can get to some of our favorite scores. But I want to know more so, do you guys have specific moments in fantasy and sci-fi films that you feel are made by the music, or the music made you feel a certain way? We'll start with you, Luca.
Honestly, when you said that, when we talked about this earlier, the first one that came to mind was Avatar, The Last Airbender, the last Agni Kai between Zuko and Azula. Like, I don't know if you guys remember that track, like the music that played, but it was very slow and calm, which was like a really nice sort of like juxtaposition with what was actually happening. Right. And if you guys remember, like the sound effects of the fire, like the that would happen, like that would just play into the soundtrack so nicely. And it was like such like a slow violin that like played over that battle. And I thought that was like a really cool way to do like a final confrontation. Like it was so dramatic, and honestly, that may be my favorite moment in the entire both Avatars. Like another one was actually the first time I played The Witcher 3, and the first time I got into like combat, and it played like Silver for Monsters. I don't know, Will, you probably know that song.
Is this the one, because you use a lot of the Witcher soundtrack in your D&D game?
I do, yeah.
Is that the one with like the singers?
Yes.
Okay.
It's like, it's very Eastern European folk sort of like singing with like very aggressive violins, and it's like a very, very
that was
I think that might be it. It just very violent, but like also beautiful. And it was just like, I'd never heard the soundtrack, and I just dove into the game. And then when I heard it for the first time, I was like, what? Like, this plays whenever you fight. Like, this is amazing. Skyrim also, fantastic soundtrack. I can't think of like a specific moment though, when you like first hear the theme, maybe even just like loading the game up. Like the home screen.
Man, I remember like sitting like on my like the couch, like Christmas Day at my dad's, like in the sitting in the basement, like watching the TV, and like when you hear like the theme song start blasting, like watching the screen load up for like right when it first came out or whatever, like it was just like absolutely mind-blowing.
It was so good.
The top 10 moments of Will's life.
Booting up Skyrim for the first time.
Wearing a hood for the first time in an Elder Scrolls game. And then, when you exit the cave.
Moments. I mean, obviously, there's so many good ones. I think like these days, especially like with things like TikTok. I don't want to sound like a fucking millennial here. Sorry to the Gen Z who might be listening, but with things like TikTok, we sort of get like this I don't want to use the wrong words here, like a trivialization of music through memery, so like there's like epic scores like the Avengers one, dun, 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 dun. Like that is such a great theme, and in the movies holds so much weight when you actually finally get to hear it.
Portals. I think
that's in the portal scene. Like so important and so like iconic, but then like you scrolling through Instagram, you see a TikTok for like a fucking taco shop, and it's like playing that music. You're like, what? Like, I don't think it's a disservice though. I think it's sort of like the Jaws theme, right? When the shark is coming around, that is so iconic that, if you're someone like me who's never seen Jaws, if you watch Jaws, then that scene comes up, it's sort of like, oh, that's tacky. Like, this is the music they chose. I had the same experience when I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey. That I can't even remember the name. Very famous track. Dun, 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 the fucking. Yeah, I'll put clips in this episode of music because it'll be pretty hard to explain what I'm talking about.
The one episode without clips.
Yeah.
The music one.
Yeah. But yeah, I had a similar experience to that when I heard it. I was like, oh, they chose this song, and it was like, no, that's from this. Like, that's where it comes from. You're like, oh, cool. Interesting. But yeah, some of my favorite moments are like anytime in Star Wars. That's why I put the binary sunset behind me here. And Star Wars, I think, okay, first of all, John Williams is hands down the greatest composer of all time, not just film composer. I said it. I don't care. Beethoven's not going to fight me. The time has passed.
Yeah, fuck you, Beethoven.
Yeah, fuck Beethoven.
Come to my hands.
Make the shirts.
Have you guys heard the Moonlight Sonata? Like, come on.
But I think like it's a disservice that film composers don't get more credit compared to like, the historical weight of composers like Beethoven and all those old guys, Bach and all that.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about it.
I mean, I would even argue the same thing with like video game composers as well.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes there are those who do both, but I think like, yeah, like, because like, for example, like what Lucas said, Witcher 3. Also, did you ever listen to the Blood and Wine DLC soundtrack?
Oh, so good. Like just this first song that plays, like I forgot what it's called. Lullaby of Woe. Like just on like I'm just like on the loading screen, like when it's like new game continue, like on the Blood and Wine.
Yeah,
like that, just that song. It's called the Lullaby of Woe. If you want to look it up, phenomenal.
Yeah, no, definitely super majestic. And like, yeah, I also like for like today, I was gonna say like the Dark Souls 3 in particular, and like Bloodborne. Maybe like Bloodborne, which is like my background, Canehurst Castle. Like there's only like 5 or 6 tracks on its soundtrack, but
wow,
it's all like really, really good because it's all like it's all like piano based and stuff like that, and like some of them, which is like boss music, has like for like specific, I guess, iconic bosses from the game are like almost like anxiety inducing.
Yeah,
it just like hits like a massive climax to which to which like I don't know, just like amps it up.
12 years old.
Yeah, or Elder Scrolls for sure, where they have like the same, I guess, like theme that is like repeated in most of their games, minus Oblivion, because Oblivion has a different soundtrack. They don't use the Dragonborn song because like each game has like a variation of it.
Oh, okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Dragonborn theme is just fucking iconic at this point. But in the game, like my actual thing in the game is like pressing the pause menu and it's still playing when you're in the middle of the fight, trying to get to your health potions.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I like remember it the most, because it sort of like takes a backseat, and then when you start playing the game, it like rises up again.
Man, I remember like torrenting that song in like 2011 and then like blowing out my eardrums with like my the Beats Light headphones.
This guy's in the gym listening to fucking Dovahkiin.
No, for real.
Anyway, I was saying John Williams in Star Wars. There's it's very subtle, but anytime someone's using the Force, there's that sort of on the strings. And then sometimes when you get the big moments, it's the Force theme that starts to play through or cut through any melody or any score that's currently happening. like say it's like a big fight or something. If we
Duel
cut
of the
back in,
Fates.
yeah, Duel of Fates, yeah, is just incredible on its own. But the way that like there's a sound of the force, that it's not just the sound effect, like the vibration and like the vroom of the force. It's like there's a musical note that when you hit that musical note, it's like, oh, there's magic now. And that is, pardon the pun, the magic of scores and composing for fantasy movies, in that you can have like, I would say more so probably than any other property, and I am totally biased and I'm fine with admitting that, but more so than any property that I'm familiar with, the music of Star Wars is a character as much as any of the characters are themselves. Um, I think in some movies, the score sort of is the score, and even if it's beautiful and well created and well thought out, it doesn't have that same charm. Star Wars has the benefit of being the front of pop culture for the last 40 years, so it is hard to look at it objectively. But the music of Star Wars is just so iconic that it is as iconic as Luke Skywalker, if not more. And as we see Star Wars evolve and become bigger than it is or was, that music is the constant. Yeah. And any Star Wars movie you watch, with the exception of Solo and Rogue One, you're getting those themes that sort of are 40 years old, but still when you hear them, they have that significant like resonance, and it's a feeling of familiarity, even if they're a little bit different in this one. Or if Rey's theme in Episode 9 is a little bit darker and a little bit more sinister than it was in Force Awakens, you still have that same,
Like core
prevailing
sounds.
theme. Yeah.
No, it's totally true, and that's how that's what makes music in a fantasy or in any movie or any medium just iconic, is like having that character, like you said. Like Lord of the Rings, for example, has like very specific music that plays in depending on what's happening. Actually, there's a YouTube channel called Listening In, and the host just like does such a great job of analyzing the musical theory behind why, like how it works and why it works so well. He did Duel of the Fates, or actually did like the most iconic song in every Star Wars film.
Okay.
But specifically Duel of the Fates like ties in so many different themes of the broader like 4, 5, 6 films into the same song, and then as that like epic what's a orchestral or no choral, like the voices. So good, so
Yeah.
good.
I love to that point, going from the first Star Wars trilogy to the prequel trilogy, the addition, because in the first trilogy there is no choir, but in the prequel trilogy there is, and it sort of speaks to this more sophisticated time. The addition of the choir to be like this older time where like the music's not really being played in the story, but having the addition of that like older, I don't even know what you'd call that, but that older medium of song is really effective in portraying that this is like in a more honorable and ancient time of more like sophisticated times. Yeah. Which is, I thought was like brilliant. I didn't like, and Duel of the Fates is the ultimate choral song in Star Wars for sure.
And with Darth Maul,
Battle of Heroes is excellent as well.
Oh, Battle of the Heroes is like, yeah, those are probably two of my favorites. I also love Leia's theme. Yeah, the Battle of the Heroes is just heartbreaking every time. Like, it's like Duel of the Fates and Battle of the Heroes were like that, and like the Lord of the Rings main theme. Like when I was like at the park as a kid, like those were the songs that I'd like play in my head. Like, I'm like jumping on monkey bars. Like,
dude, the ride or the Rohan theme is like one of my favorite songs, just in general.
Yeah.
Also, we can't talk about soundtracks without mentioning God of War 4.
Oh,
I don't know, Will, have you played God of War?
Yes.
And Matt, you have.
I played it the night before it came out.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Spicy.
I know.
You know what? Now that like I talk about it all the fucking time, but the score is one thing I didn't like. I definitely downloaded it and was like, yeah, I'm gonna throw this in the D&D loop, but go ahead.
It has a few songs that I would say like are like nearly perfect. If you remember, like right at the start of the game where Kratos is cutting down the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that song that plays, I think it's called Ashes.
And I think that's the title theme too, like when you're on the loading screen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also the song that plays at the very end of the game when you've made it to the highest peak.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one has so much like vocal singing, and I love like a choir in any soundtrack. But
Right.
God of War has like one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. Like every song, one after the other, is just phenomenal. Lullaby of the Giants, so good. I think that one plays when you've made it to Jotunheim for the first time.
Yeah.
But like that moment, like cutting down that tree was like a moment I was like, wow, like listen to this music. Like this is just like goosebumps.
The other moment taking place on the same river when the sky is bleeding, everything's red after Atreus, struggling with his divinity. That moment where you're going back for the blades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That music in that scene was super like chilling, but also like when you get the blades comforting. It's such a wild moment. Yeah.
I would like contrast that with like the earlier God of War games where like the music is a lot more like intense and like much more like active. Again, like going back to like maybe not like how like Bloodborne creates anxiety, like especially like God of War 3 where it's just like upbeat and like angry, which is kind of the entire first trilogy plus the I guess proto fourth one. So like because like I definitely found like God of War 4's music was like definitely like slower, I guess.
Yeah.
And, like more like deliberate, whereas like God of War 3, if you listen to like even like the main soundtrack, it's just like in your face, like let's just go kill everything. So
yeah, that's what the gameplay was too. Like the game was like you played God of War for the violence, not for the story. Whereas this is like very much a story. Like it's like the fact that there's no cutscenes in it, or I mean the fact there's no loading screens in it, like it's just all like a seamless story, and the music ties into it like perfectly. Like it's such an intentionally written soundtrack where like every moment, every song has like such hard impact. Like even the music that plays when you fight, like when you see the dragon for the first time, for example, like it's just really, really powerful, but yet elegantly done somehow. Like it's so well done. It's by Bear McCready. He's done a couple other soundtracks. Let me see what.
Another good one I'd say is
or McCreary, sorry, not McCready.
Uncharted 4 has a pretty good one too.
It did, yeah. I actually never finished that game. I need to go back and finish.
I never even started the Uncharted series.
Yeah, I've never played any of the other ones, just 4.
Damn.
I want to talk a little bit about whimsical scores as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the one I think we can all recognize would be like the score of Hobbiton, or the Shire rather. That first time you come to the Shire when the movie opens, very bright. And that same theme gets repeated throughout the entirety of the trilogy, but there's a lot of moments where it's like Frodo and Sam talking about the Shire, or being like, I want to go home, or this fucking sucks. And that theme will just, a little hint of it'll play, or it'll play like on violin, or like on different stringed instruments than like I think it's a flute that is played in the first iteration of it. And it does such a perfect job at like reminding you of what home was, but also conveying that like home is far away. This is not the same sound as that was.
Yeah.
You still take home with you wherever you go. I think, a beautiful way to keep that whimsy with the Hobbit storyline while also fitting into the score. But I did some research on whimsical themes, specifically on the Studio Ghibli movies, on why they sound so pretty. There was a great YouTube video about that if you want to check that out. Basically, what they were saying is there was a shift. I don't remember why or when, but there's a guy named Claude Debussy who was Debussy, who was a composer who sort of strayed away from the traditional way of composing and went more so into a way of what they say is like impressionist composing. So impressionism usually refers to like a style of painting that captures a single moment, or the suspension of suspending a moment of time, I should say. And that's why like it's always like those pictures that you have to sort of like squint at to see what's going on. It's almost like a shift is happening and they're capturing that, like taking a photo and like while someone's moving or something, that sort of thing. So it shows motion while also capturing exactly what's going on. And those impressionist photos are, and I might be explaining that in a very broad way, but those paintings are often like very up for interpretation on what the intended purpose was. Was it only to capture this moment? Is it symbolic towards what the transition of this moment is, that it was painted that way? But impressionism in terms of music, very in line with composing a soundtrack to a film or to a video game, because we're taking these moments that we want to heighten through the power of music to convey a certain message. And those simple notes that just hang a little bit too long can do that. And so a lot of times in film scores, it's without percussion, and we're really using strings as percussion. A good example would sort of be like, if anyone's familiar with Psycho, like the Alfred Hitchcock, the scene where he's stabbing the woman in the shower. Sorry if that's gruesome. Without music, like I've seen that scene without music, it's very like, obviously the times they didn't have special effects and stuff like that. It's terrible to say that, like it doesn't hold up. It's the music that really makes that scene. It's fucking super unsettling because like that's not how music's played. Like that's very jarring and like upsetting to hear, and like, you know, puts you on edge. And sort of like the rhythm of the strings in that scene is, you know, implied, or is the same rhythm in which he's stabbing her, which is awful, but such a clever way to convey something happening without having to show it grotesquely, especially when you don't have the, you know, the ability to show things like that due to like lack of technical skill at that time, or technology. So yeah, stuff like that. Impressionism through music, I think, is really what film scores come down to. It's that when you sing the Avengers or hum the Avengers theme, you see the portals, or you see the airport scene, or, you know, you see the first Avengers where they all, you know, squat up for the first time, and there's that super sick wide shot that sort of pans in, and, you know, yeah, capturing those moments, I think the music does better than anything else can. Thoughts on impressionism?
Yeah, totally. And like the great thing about capturing those moments is being able to reuse that sound later and change it to like affect, like how you were talking about the Hobbits, like you always hear the Hobbit theme, but like you'd add like a minor key in it, or like something would go from, I don't know, being like a F note to a F flat, you know, like
right.
It just like brings it down a tone, and it like, it's the same music. It happens in Star Wars constantly,
right?
And like all these famous composers do it. Like they take the theme they have that like you associate with the scene that you watched the first heard it in, especially if it's iconic enough, and then they like are able to have different, like if, or specifically in the Duel of Fates, you have multiple different instruments playing that same the theme, like the quick theme. At first it's like violins, then it goes to oboes, then it goes to like French horns, and like every single time it's played, it gives you a different feeling, you know? So I think that's like the thing that makes these memorable soundtracks so iconic. The fact that you can like every single moment it's used in can be like changed and adjusted, different instruments, different keys, and it is more or less like what's driving the emotional impact of the scenes, not even like what you're seeing on screen. It's more so the music, I would say, if anything.
Yeah, and certainly like the combination of what's happening with the addition of the music, and almost like the music's influencing us to feel a certain way before the thing even happens. So I love John Williams does this all the time, where a theme that we're familiar with will play and then immediately turn into something darker to sort of subvert expectations. You're like, oh, the Force, and then it's like, but it's evil. Like, yeah, I love that. Again, going back to the Impressionism, there's sort of like with this sort of transition, this Claude Debussy guy, there was sort of a transition into things not being structured. So imagine like a drum and like just a 1-2, taking that away from composing really changes everything, because then your time signatures can change and you can go from, you know, being the Force theme floating into something abstract, like in Star Wars often done. You know, you start with the Force and then it fades out into space, and that sound of space, which, you know, has a lot of different sounds depending on which sci-fi or fantasy movie you're watching. The sound of space is always like a little bit different, whether it's like welcoming the way it is or mysterious in John Williams' score, opposed to like someone like Hans Zimmer, where it's very much not. It's very much silent and ominous and deadly, almost the sound and feeling of it is. We talked, myself and Maya, who I had on Abashed, by the time you people are seeing this last Friday, we talked a lot about the music in Breath of the Wild, but it follows this similar floating sort of thing. And being Breath of the Wild, it's sort of taken that open air approach to the composing as well. So everything feels like the wind is like carrying the music. It's like there's just little and that'll just like breeze by, and it just captures like a subtle moment when you open the chest or when you discover something or when the sun comes up. It's just like a small moment that, you know, is displayed by the musical tone or the musical note that's being played, but then it's like just as soon gone and transitioning into something else. Video games do this often. Zelda does it for sure. And when you're fighting a boss and you like ground them, and then you're able to run up the back and slice them in the back of the head, and you have to do that 3 times or whatever. But in that sequence where you get them down, the music will change to something uplifting. And then when he like goes into the animation and like rears you off the back of his head, it switches back into that, oh shit, this is a boss fight music, which I love.
Pokemon does that big time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like Pokemon Silver, where it's just like as soon as he gets spotted, it's just like instantly like it just like blows out your eardrums. It's just like, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also cool to see like the same genre be applied to different things and convey a different tone or a different mood. Like jazz being used, like, you know, when you get when you get like a crime noir movie, right? You know, it starts off with that jazz. It was 1942. Like you can hear that sound behind, right? I didn't know what was going on. But then also like James Bond, like was it Goldfinger, right? I always get that in the Austin Powers one confused, which is Goldmember. Different one. But Goldfinger, like that dun, 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 dun. Like yeah, the music from the video game, you know, when he turns and shoots the fucking thing. That's also the same genre, but it's so different. Like the music being played in those two things is like the intent is way different, but it's the same genre. So it's interesting, like that you can pull different emotions from the same type of thing. I think a lot of composers limit themselves in that same way to, oh, if I want to do a intense scene, there's got to be drums in there. It's like you can do just as much with the same instruments and just, depending on how you're using them and the velocity of what you're hitting the strings with.
Yeah. Because like that's like going back to like Bloodborne, like again, like all the entire soundtrack is more or less like the same melody and rhythm. It's just heightened up or like sped up or etc. Just to kind of like keep it all going. And also like I also like when there's like an absence of music sometimes.
Yeah.
So like for example, like in movies, like you have like No Country for Old Men, but again, like in the Dark Souls series and or more so like Bloodborne, there's not really that much music. And like that's why I think I liked it so much, because like it only really plays like when you have these more like iconic moments where you're, for example, like unlocking a certain area, progressing, and like when you hit to a certain progression point in the game, or like facing off against very like specific bosses that you must fight in order to make the game move on. But like again, like if you listen to it, because you can find it like on like Apple Music, and it's only like a handful of songs, but like they're almost all the same. But like like a lot of the tracks are like named after certain bosses as well, which is like kind of cool, because it like again it's all like the same melody and stuff like that, but like certain ones are like sped up to increase like anxiety, like when you're facing off like certain ones, because like some bosses in Bloodborne are just like insane and like much more faster and like terrifying and like constantly transforming and stuff like that. So like the music will like bump it up and like will be like frantic the whole time, which is like contrasted to like most of the game where it's just like in the background music, or like the background sounds is just like, I guess like what you would hear like in a town full of werewolves and other beast-like creatures. Like there's like no music, but you hear like people like creatures like shuffling about and stuff like that and like panting, but you don't hear like I guess like musical tones and stuff like that when you perform certain actions and stuff. So I think like knowing when to use the music, I think, is also pretty key. Or sound.
Yeah, totally. I think when we first started playing D&D, it was sans music, based off I think, Luca, when we were playing upstairs in my place, we didn't have access to music, or it was too loud, or whatever the case was. But when we started playing with it, one of the first things I encountered was the players being like, fuck, like I'm nervous, like the music got intense for fighting this thing, and like now I'm anxious, and like now they're like dialed in. Where they might have been like hanging out and just, maybe on their phone every now and then before in the combat situations. Now when the music comes on, it's like their focus is on what's happening. Same thing can be said when it's like, I like to sort of jump between, and for people who have watched the Adventure series, you'll see like the way I edit that is the music sort of comes in the fighting scenarios, but with the atmospheres, I really like to put like the sounds in. So like when we're in the dungeon, it's like the cave sounds and that type of thing. Whereas like music in those situations, plus copyright. But even when I'm running games, like I prefer, like, Luke, I don't know if you remember, but there was one point where we're in like that winter area. And I didn't even have music on the whole time. It was just that constant wind of like a blizzard. And I remember like when the session ended, I turned it off. Everyone like like decompressed, like the sound actually made them cold. Like they were like, fuck, that was uncomfortable. I got so used to it that like the absence of it now is like so relieving. I don't know. Sorry. It's just interesting the effect sound and music, or lack thereof, can have on the experience, whether it be gaming or like viewing. Do you have, I think the difference between you and I in that regard is you always have music going.
Yeah, I would always have music. I'd have like playlists for combat encounters, and then for just like everything else. I mean, I think it definitely adds that layer of, I don't want to say realism, but just like it draws you further into the experience.
Mhm.
Um, and that's like one of the big fears of seeing like new IPs being produced in new mediums. Like the soundtrack is so important, because honestly for me, like I don't associate, for example, Lord of the Rings, I associate it more with the music than anything else.
Yeah.
Like Star Wars too, like it's not like one character, it's always the music that is sort of the how to say, like,
It's like the connective tissue between all the storylines and all the
yeah, and it's like what represents the whole scope of the story and the world. Like it's like the flavor of it. It's the,
Mhm.
it's like if you were to describe Star Wars in a word, it'd be the song. Like,
Yeah.
it's like that is what it is. So if that's a miss, then everything after it is just a miss.
Yeah. The one from Lord of the Rings that is Lord of the Rings to me is the I don't know what it's called, but like the very dark one that plays after, it's like the intro for all the movies when Galadriel speaks. It's
Yeah,
sort of what plays when she, yeah.
like whenever
Sorry,
they
Will?
mention something like very like foreboding.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah. And that's the tone that the whole film has, right? And
Exactly.
so it's that theme that really, pardon the pun, sets the tone
Mhm.
for the whole for the whole theme. And that's why, going back to something we talked about a couple weeks ago with The Hobbit and why it didn't work, um, because things like that, like using the Ring Wraith theme for the Pale Orc, is such a
Yeah.
disservice to the overall tone of the films. Whereas the Hobbit score should be way more whimsical than the Lord of the Rings, because it's before the bad times. You
Mhm.
know, these things should feel trivial, not to the characters, but to us, the viewers, who know everything's going to be okay
Yeah.
because we've seen what happens next. Yeah, I think like they miss the mood and the tone, because having stuff like intense music like that we know to be foreboding, and we see what that music actually represents later on, to have that as something as trivial as like these beef between two people who are unrelated to that conflict, it's just like, I don't know. So just falls flat, I guess.
Yeah, it does. And everything about the tone of the Hobbit was drawing from like the font of the lettering,
Mhm.
like everything, the visually, like the cinematography, how the colors look, like it all was like, we're Lord of the Rings, but like you're not,
Yeah.
and that's why it was such a miss.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk about like sounds of the movie playing into the score. Um, and as people would have seen last week, we reviewed The Green Knight. That film opens with a very cool song. And the scene where like it's water dripping from the top, tap, 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 tap. And
Mhm.
that actually becomes part of the song that plays, or the theme that plays. And I thought that was like a fucking perfect way to showcase like this is like a normal thing for this guy. Like the sounds of the world are so much like the mundane everyday. It's like, going outside and going about your day, like those sounds of the world around you are the story of what's being told, sort of like folding itself back into the narrative that's being showed in front of us. I was like, whoa, cool. And as someone who produces music myself, like using just unorthodox things as percussion instruments, I'm always for that. Yeah, you guys have any examples of like scores that sort of surprise you with the creativity?
I don't know about surprising with creativity, but like going back to my first example, the Agni Kai, like the sound of their fire bending plays
Right,
beautifully
yeah.
into the actual like soundtrack. Actually, I just remembered another great moment from I just remembered it because like it's from Mulan, the first movie. It's when she chooses to take her father's armor and cut her hair and go, like that music that plays. I love that
Oh,
song.
Reflections, right?
I think it's called Mulan's Decision on like the
Okay.
soundtrack, but
Oh, it's not like a musical number, it's like just a theme.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's just so good. And like I know I looked it up on YouTube like 6 months ago or something, just driving in the car, and I was like, I want to listen to that. So but like the soundtrack doesn't have some of the sounds like that you hear in the film, and I was like, oh, this sounds weird, like this sounds different, there's something missing. Yeah. And that was like, you just reminded me of that, and I love that moment too, like one of the best moments. Like I sometimes even now rewatch that scene just to like get those feelings.
Yeah, love that. Will?
I can't. Maybe not like off of the ones that I can think of, like the ones that I've listened to, where you would hear, I guess, like sounds like on like the soundtrack, like separately from like when you listen to the soundtrack, maybe like in the movie they're connected. I think Lord of the Rings does it a few times, especially with like the Riders of Rohan theme, or like the Charge. I forget which that track is called. I think it's the Riders of Rohan. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of any like very like distinct ones, and I was trying to look one up, but yeah, I don't know.
I listened to
actually no, I would say maybe The Witcher 3 soundtrack, like for the video game. I know like there's some like sound effects that's included in the game are in the that are like a part of the soundtrack as well. Like that, like I don't even know how to like reproduce the sound, but like whenever you like I guess like level up kind of, you can hear that like in one of the songs. It sounds like a very like it's like a not gradual, but like it builds up to like this loud like clashing sound.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a cymbal, but it's not.
Like a reverse.
Yeah. So like I know that's it. I think that's in Steel is for Humans, I think is the one. But yeah, I don't know.
The great song.
Yeah.
Oh, I just remember there's I love I just forgot his name. The guy that did Interstellar.
Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer, yeah. He did the soundtrack for The Last Samurai.
Yeah.
And there's like the scene at the very end where they're like riding off to the final battle. There's
the
like
Red Warrior.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. It's like the song starts with like the chant of all the soldiers like riding off to war, and it's just like
50 seconds in. I know exactly what you're talking.
Yeah. It's exactly like 50, like a minute into the
Oh my god.
And there's
Hans Zimmer also did 2049, which is one of those soundtracks that like I'll just listen to all the way through because it just fits so perfectly in with the movie that I'm like, oh yeah, this scene made me cry.
Yeah, he's done like a lot, like, because I know he's also done like the Thin Red Line, which had a really good soundtrack score thing. And then also
oh my god, he's
Dunkirk is also
Dunkirk.
Yeah, he is. Dunkirk is also one of those ones that uses the ticking of all the clocks in the movie to fit in with the theme. Super cool. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, he does a lot of the Nolan ones. I think he also did the 3 Batman trilogy, but I could be wrong there.
He did.
Koji Kondo, who did Zelda, not just for those iconic Zelda themes, Zelda's Lullaby, Saria's Song, Song of Storms, all that great stuff. And music is such a big part of those games. But also just like the creepy, dark tones of things like Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess and Midna's Lament, all that sort of using music in a non-traditional way, like going in a different scale, like instead of doing 4 beats per measure, doing 5 just to throw people off and make them uncomfortable in certain areas. Super cool stuff. Mamoru Fujisawa, better known as Joe Hisaishi, which I'm pronouncing wrong. But his name's Mamoru. How cool is that?
R.I.P.
He does all the Studio Ghibli movies, or most of the Studio Ghibli movies, with all that fun stuff. yeah.
Man, yeah, there's actually so many good anime soundtracks. We didn't even dive into that, but you
Oh,
guys
man.
need to
Guts'
watch
theme.
Hunter x Hunter. Goddamn. It's
Yeah,
so
there's
good.
that one that, like, and again, go back to TikTok. There's that one theme from Hunter x Hunter that everyone uses as a TikTok sound. Very I can't even, it's like very like low key and like sad, but also like sort of epic at the end of it. JoJo's, that one saxophone theme.
Mm-hmm. One Piece
Obviously
has a lot of great
Naruto.
Naruto, yeah, like what's it called? Oh, I don't remember the name. Pain's theme, like
Oh yeah, that choir theme is unbelievable.
so good. So
Even
good.
like the grief and sorrow tracks that play in Naruto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, when all the fucking sad things that happen in that show happen,
Yep.
it's like, oh, here comes that stupid song, you know, I'm gonna cry. Fucking yeah, sometimes I'll just listen to Naruto soundtracks and get sad. Or
Yeah.
like I'll listen to like the opening credits music and get sad. But then there's also that great theme from Naruto, you know, with all the
Battle music.
fucking flute comes in and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the fucking electric guitars come in and it's like, fucking yeah. Everything's gonna be okay.
Guts' theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How often do you guys listen to soundtracks like while you're driving or something?
How often do I listen to Guts' theme?
Oh, Guts' theme, like, yeah, that one's like a meme in itself now too.
Yeah, that was literally me winter 2020 final exams.
This Guts' theme, 10-hour loop.
Just looking up and crying the whole time. So rap through environment. Actually, I listen to it quite a lot. Hold on, I do have one particular dude I listen to. Huey Days, and this big one. I do listen to also the Halo soundtracks for the first
Oh
three.
yeah, that
Those
one's
are-
also a meme now too, where
Yeah.
the kids go into the bathroom and harmonize.
But there's also like absolute bangers on the other ones, like In Amber Clad or motherfucking
Fuck yeah.
Keep What You Steal, and like a bunch of, there's like a shit ton of them, especially like in the with the second one, because I had a ton in it. I think I had like 40 songs or something like that. Like there's like a part 1 and part 2, which is like whack because it was like a 4-hour game.
Damn.
From like 04. Yeah. But I would say quite a bit. I do like listening to like ambience or having like ambience music in the background when I drive.
So the ones that you listen to, do you listen to them like start to finish and like try to get the feeling of the game or the movie or whatever the case may be?
No,
Or do
shuffle
you
it.
just oh wow, okay, that's wild.
And then also like yeah.
It's weird though, like sometimes I'll start listening to a soundtrack and for that exact reason, like it's too taxing for me to go through the whole film again or the whole story again. So like sometimes I wish I could listen to things on shuffle, but I'm so not that type of person.
I also
Everything
have,
has to be the way it was intended.
yeah, I also have like I guess like songs that would be considered maybe similar to like progressional music, which I'll like listen to sometimes. Like if it's like if I wake up like early and I just lay there like a beached whale, I'll just like throw it on and then just like kind of like chill out.
10-hour Kid Cudi humming loop.
Yeah. Landlord's banging on the door for the inspection. I'm just laying there listening to listening to
Yeah, we should make an ASMR POV.
what's that one song?
You're
with
lying like
King
a beast
Chip?
while your landlord pounds on the door.
Just the Way I Am. Is that it?
It's one from the album he did with Kanye. I've never listened to the actual song. I just used to throw on the 10-hour loop to fall asleep. Somebody put like rain sounds behind it.
Or yeah, the one song with King Chip. Yeah, just what I am.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Those guys driving around listening to Just What I Am.
Sharif. Shout out to Sharif again. Yeah, Luca, how often do you save us? How often do you listen to soundtrack?
I probably listen to soundtracks more often than I listen to regular music.
Wow. You're a weirdo.
Yeah.
This guy's driving around listening to fucking death scenes in fantasy books and soundtracks.
Fucking
This is crying.
the fucking new Barktown theme from Pokemon Silvers.
Oh yeah, even like Lavender Town. I actually I remixed that at one point. And it was just
great
super
songs.
dark. Yeah. Okay, final question. If you had to pick one soundtrack to be the soundtrack of your life through the highs and lows, and the music would play like everyone would just be cool with it, but it would play like very much main character energy. Which soundtrack would you choose?
Guts' theme.
That's one song.
One song.
That's
Choosing
all
all.
I
Fucking. That's wild, man. You're a wild man.
Guts' theme is all I need.
He's so annoying. Just Will's sad, Guts theme. Will's happy. It's playing. Like, man, I don't want to fucking hang out with this guy anymore. What about you, Luca?
Tough question. I don't know. I think The Witcher 3, maybe. That might be my favorite soundtrack of all time. Just like it has all the feelings.
I do prefer Blood and Wine version soundtrack more, I'll be honest.
Than the main. Yeah, but I mean like The Witcher 3 soundtrack goes from the main game to the DLCs. Like it's all of it. Blood and Wine.
Okay.
Blood and Wine draws in the themes of the original. Like they use it's like variations, and there's new songs. Obviously, it's a brand new like environment, but
it's just more southern France sounding.
Exactly. Yeah, it feels more Renaissance than the dark, moody tones of the original game.
Yeah, you'll listen to Banks of the Sands Retour. It's a fucking banger.
You heard it here. I think okay, so obviously it's tough for me not to just say Star Wars, but I feel like that might be like too taxing. Like some of it's too bright. So I'm actually gonna go with Naruto because if I ever got into a street fight, which God forbid, but that music just starts playing, the drums, fucking guy would fucking run away, man. No one squared up against that guy who has that music playing.
No.
And then obviously, like, who wouldn't want to listen to grief and sorrow when they were grieving or sad?
It's sorrowful.
Yeah. That's the right word.
The soaps.
Yeah, also for viewers, every show we do on this channel uses the same theme music, just remixed in a different way, similar to how a real composer might pull on their own themes. This show is the original. Unabashed is a chop. I think Ruminations is a transposed version of it and then chopped, and then Adventures is a reversed version of it and then chopped. So if you want to check those out, watch one of our videos, one of each video. Anything else, you guys, before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I forgot one of the best soundtracks from any media nerddom fandom I've heard in the past decade is Doom 2016.
Yes, you are right.
Yeah, BFG Division. Holy fuck, man! When you have that, I don't even know how many times I've like blown out earphones from just like max voluming that. Because like I'm probably
Doom. You said?
Yeah,
Doom 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
Great
like
soundtrack.
Yeah. Rip and tear. Holy shit! It's like it gets the testosterone boiling.
Wait, Will, how often do you work out to soundtracks?
That's like half of my workout music.
That's awesome.
The only one they
probably 2/3. Yeah.
It's half of it's Doom soundtrack and the other half is Kid Cudi humming.
Yeah, literally guts.
Okay. Man, this is gonna be a hard video to edit. We'll see if I keep my promise of putting clips in here.
Also,
We'll
speaking
see.
of what I was eating earlier, like that flash, I ate
Yeah, I saw that, but
an
I wasn't
entire
sure.
strudel into my mouth. I've been like
Jeez.
hammering these bad boys.
What the fuck is wrong with you, man? You could have told us to wait 15 minutes. You could have ate. Anyways, fucking yeah, okay. Check out Unabashed last Friday. This Friday, you could check out an episode of Adventures, like we were talking about before. So if you want to see how I would mix music for a D&D session, you could check that out. And our adventure where we have traveled back in time. I think shortly coming to a close, another session or two. So check out for those. As we gear up towards the finale there. And yeah, you can catch the show every Tuesday. I'm Matt.
I'm Luca.
Will.
We are the Lords of Lore. Yeah. That was a little bit different than last time. Close
Nice.
enough.